These are available if you go to our website on the page that is advertising these particular teachings. So there's a translation of those from Ruth Sonam available for everybody. And I see that we are about 2 minutes to the hour. So please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee. I'll invite Geshe down and we'll get started momentarily.
Yeah, Kanga Tashi Dele Yabokogde.
Do you hear Geshe-la's voice all right, everybody? Okay, great.
Tatare.
Dadare.
Sosate.
And you can hear me as well. You can? Okay, all right. All right. Just good to get those things sorted from the beginning. So let's continue. Losogi.
Oh, yeah, Tachiro Kanga Tashi Dele Sosana Kawaya Bayinaki Wodo Yapoyo Irawachiboyos.
So first of all, greetings Tashidele to all Dharma friends. Wherever you find yourself, Geshe-la hopes that you are well and he hopes that you're happy.
Oh, Tanganzon the Dig in its Ruso at Tetan Dadnika Deshi, Tatu Delatini, Tatu Deshi, Jo. And
so we engage with these teachings with a joyful awareness that by receiving these teachings, we are able to accumulate causes of both temporary and ultimate happiness. This is the purpose. So in terms of these causes of happiness, there are causes which are coarser and there are causes that are more subtle, causes that are apparent to us and also causes that are not visible or evident to us. And so, in terms of really actualizing that ultimate happiness, this happens on the basis of realizations. And of course, cultivating those realizations isn't something that is necessarily easy, right? It is something that happens gradually with steps.
아니 셀서 선서 가르고 그래서나 간조 폰도 쓰고 통고 요 말이 되는 대시 그저 수사야 돼 할레비트니 버게 니바사야 돼 할레비 같이 뭐 짓어 그거 알았어.
And so one of the important things, and also not necessarily a thing that is immediately apparent to us, it is an understanding that the happiness that we experience, the cause of happiness, is really in large part our accumulation of merit. So accumulation of merit, or what is wholesome, is extremely important.
다 디거더니 무슨 될 아니 수사야 돼 디거 좋아지 요 봐이나 소소가 놀었더니 수사를 좀 내가 제가 이날에 개발되바 이날에 디소고스 가르쳐 봐인 다 느리깔 데리 줬더니 다 보게 좋아지 먹어야 했더니 가르쳐 거가도 마순에 다 표도 지모지 요 알았어.
So if we have this awareness, right, that these accumulations are the causes that are going to give rise to our future happiness, then at home, whether we are engaging in practices of the accumulation or purification of obscurations, whether we are engaging in the cultivation of hearing, contemplation, and meditation, we will be able to do this with the joyful awareness of what it is the causes for.
다시고 돈바수고 다 소소 할레비 야본 로야 드리슈나 오다 세놀라 때니 보인 로베 요바도 이모다 야본 만도와도 마세게 샤와이나요.
So, in the words of the realized teachers, and also in the words of many kind of stories that are given, we understand that when things are going well, going according to plan, this is the result of our accumulation of merit. It depends upon that. And also, likewise, when there are obstacles, when things are not going the way that we would like them to go, this is said to be the result of a degeneration in those merits. Sonam
Senundoyaga ledo tanda den plan lama yoares. Ina seno nyoso aiza.
So, and likewise, and likewise, when young, for example, young people, when they pass before their time, it is said that this happens because there was a karma to pass away that was there, which we all have, but specifically the early passing is related to a degeneration in merit. And also in the sutras, how where the Buddha states that one who is endowed with great merits has their wishes fulfilled exactly as they hope. This is also another very important thing to keep in mind regarding this perspective.
And with
this understanding, then, whenever we engage in a virtuous activity aimed at the accumulation, we can think in a very sort of happy way with this awareness. Now I am engaged in this accumulation of merit, which has these future results. Now I am engaged in establishing these potentials.
And
similarly, when we build up this accumulation of merit, what we will find is that the accumulation of merit also serves as like a protection, that whatever obstacles may be arising around us or whatever difficulties, they will not really be able to hinder us because of that accumulation of merit.
아고서와 오다 숑바도 니지 자와 집이 다 던데가 숑주지 세텔라 숑바 쳔모 니지 쳔모 숑주지 세텔라 가제 버게 더 니런 도와도 저와 쳔모 주나 오다 쳔더 좀 마세 샤와니 샤와라 다 기고 주주지는 도야 냐트 요아레스.
And also, as Shantideva says in his text of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, in terms of these mental qualities such as love, such as compassion, such as bodhicitta, the more we are able to bring these forth in our mind and draw ourselves closer and closer to these qualities, what we will find is that the result is that we go from happiness to happiness, lifetime to lifetime, all the way until realization.
오다 숑바 쳔모 니지 쳔모 숑주지 세세세데아데 아니 센주가 쯔노지 세네 오트네 순디와스 저 강가로 세조 토야 잘라지와라와 오다 데노지.
Oh, and so love, compassion, and bodhicitta, these are likened to quicksilver, right? And quicksilver in ancient times was said to be the liquid that could change any metal, for example, iron, into gold. So love, compassion, and bodhicitta transform our lives like that.
오다 나로스 nga 세데 짜침보 쯔데야 nga 세데 단다 코이 리지레니라 코 든디지레 든 칼레 야이 끌 저토야 잘라데모 손주다 든디
So also we understand that we call the self or the I. At that moment, this self or the I is abiding in this samsaric body, right? Compelled by karma and affliction. But through the teachings, actually, on the basis of this samsaric body, we can give rise to the body of a victorious one, to the body of an enlightened being.
아 노브름보 제세나 할레비 공천부 쓰그라와스 다 간주 리트 자이클 저토소나 고세치나 자마토아 잘라치 로기와스.
And so once we achieve that body of the victor is said to be something so valuable, something so precious that its value is immeasurable. Its value is superior even to that of the value of a wish-fulfilling jewel which fulfills all hopes.
오다 데르지 페르지 가제 소노토나토네 코칼레메바치 도타키보가 소와카디나 야그라와치 못된데.
So if we think of the benefits at the beginning of the session, what this will help us to do is to bring forth our resolve and to bring forth our joy and our ability to practice steadfastly. But in order to be able to engage in all of this effectively, as a first step, we want a mind that is both relaxed and peaceful.
다 대용하셔 발라당한저 셀헬레 메바도 다 기고 메베 저와 간이 지나야 다 노도 담다 못 잡아. 더 저와 좀 메베 저 못 잡아. 들라테는 용기와레스.
And we understand that also what happens is a lot of the unhappiness or unease that arises within the mind. This is because of unskillful thoughts, projecting thoughts, stressful thoughts, and so forth.
다 대지 버게 다 미르로야지 더 좀마서야 될 다 당한저 빼도 마선데 빼리라원다고 계시셔봐이나.
So in terms of the actual methods that we use to kind of reduce these types of thoughts, to introduce peacefulness, we could use an example to illustrate those.
다 메이베 다네 룽기베 아니 치베 다 던데가 돈에 빼래.
And these examples are often given connected with the various elements. So examples related to fire, to wind, to water, and so forth.
아니 그게 매슈 전부다고 수바지요나 하고서라 소소 매군을 파서 손은 여러 친구들이 다 하고 그러서 왔어 강해지마도 요하마레.
So for example, if there is a big fire that is burning and for some reason we kind of fall into that fire or that fire is able to touch us, we know that we will endure a great suffering or difficulty.
다 배대도 노지 루슈 잡아지 버게 다 림벌이요나 소소 루트는 파 쳐서나 아주 어떤 것도 와서 언여다 여마쳐 봐요 아래 여다 뭐요 아래.
And also we know that if an extremely strong and ferocious wind is blowing, right, then it would be very dangerous for us to go outside. We could get knocked over by that wind, hit by an object, and so forth.
다 체이나 이때도 지바르 지침보 지요는 소소티노 파사소나
Mhm.
달리라고 야만 요라 침보로 왔어.
And similarly, if there is very rough and dangerous water, if we fall into this, we know that this is a real danger to us.
답에 대도 노지 난조 노돈 담다 용거래 초와 담다 용거래 되네 소소 초와 디슈를 휘네를 두노 판자네라. 아니 노도 디슈스 판도나. 하고서라더니 노도 모른도야 더 강에 치른도야 그래서 뭐뭐 용요하래스.
So actually, this is the same principle within our mind. Just as we would avoid this dangerous water or fire, what we need to do is train ourselves so that when the namtok, the discursive thought, or the unwholesome or stressful thought arises, we do not walk towards it or fall into it, because then we will be harmed.
다치도 매도 류테르질 타림보 세나문도 디노 파만로 와체 사메바체 소도 타림보 때모타네 대바이노 때모기네서 뭐뭐치 토해요.
What we can do is, instead of walking towards the fire or the dangerous water and so forth, we give ourselves some space from it so that it cannot burn us and so forth. And then what we can do is sort of observe how the fire and water are arising. And this can actually be something very interesting to investigate.
당한조 노도 뉴런도야 또 전에 소왕이 바 뉴런도야 또다 퍼게 소소 셀만에 바텔 노도 될 때모다와 노지 소왕이 바텔 때모다와 노지 당한조 때모요 하러 와서 때다와 노지 때제 소소 레카시토나 아니 다 셀레레치도 셔와치 때네 용기 하래스.
So what Geshe is advising is that instead of out of habituation kind of walking towards this discursive or unwholesome thought, which will allow it to kind of infuse and overcome us, he's advising that instead that we kind of back up from it and just observe it as we would observe any phenomenon. And what we'll find is that when we engage in that distanced observation, that the mind becomes more relaxed and peaceful as a result. Yeah.
벤다 소소 컴퓨터에 쇼론게 뇨다게 쳔모모 뇨다지요나 다 쳔모 뇨다 모모요나 따테 칼레 카오레테 디찬디사 솜타 나 아마라 제데나 두두른도야마도 소소를 페도문 와스.
So for example, let us think that outside your house there's a lot of noises. Because of where you live, there's a lot of noises that are happening outside your house, right? If you kind of dwell your mind upon those, then the impact that they're going to have on your mental peace is going to be worse and worse, right? They will have a bad impact.
But if
on the other hand, instead of thinking, oh gosh, it's so terrible outside, there's all that noise, if instead we think, oh, I wonder where that noise is coming from. Is this like, what's making that noise? This attitude of curiosity, then if we have that approach, rather than becoming upset, it actually becomes something interesting to observe.
Yeah, and
also if instead of, also how we label it with the mind, instead of like the sound of a car or something, if we see it as the sound of music, for example, this will completely change the approach with which we engage with it.
So just these
different ways of thinking about things, these help us not to abide completely within these discursive or disturbing thoughts. And they can also help us to have a different way of kind of dealing with them. So having said those preliminary remarks, not much more on those. So let us take a moment to establish a peaceful body and mind.
소소 다 리도 세가제 레레도 쇼와데나 초메베 초와 노토르지타 노게 팀바 야와 노지 바야노요 선바지.
As I am able to abide in peacefulness of body and mind, then these discursive thoughts and so forth, they will be just like clouds that float across the sky, and the sky's clarity returns.
노카 용시 짜치와 드리타 기노카 오지 아르테 노지 로소소 세테오 테노지지요 선바지.
And as we tap into this peacefulness, we think that we sort of are able to appreciate this vastness of the mind, which is vast like the sky.
다티니갈 노도도 초항에 바카로 슈치원용거야나 다텔 때모다와도 요마 티쇼스 노그미 선바지니 다 유로지스.
And think that whatever discursive or unsettling feelings and thoughts that are arising, I'm not going to kind of allow them to influence me or go in that direction. I'm just going to observe them in the mind arise and fall away.
던지가 노도 초메바 초와 초메바 되지 가제 버게 때모다 노지데바 얘는 코로스 뭐한테 템보지만 이제 이루죠. 어다 깨지깨지 이제 완로 이루지.
And also observe that whatever that disturbing thought, feeling is, that it is not something that is solid. It is in the nature of change. It is momentary, changing from moment to moment.
코로슨지 이루지 치 녀만 노지다 그렇긴냐니 깨지깨지 이제 완로 이루지 지사 템보즈네 다소소소 깔래카게 하면 됐어.
And they are the nature of change. They are just like dewdrops that will eventually be evaporated by the sun. Understanding their changing momentary nature, we don't need to grasp at or solidify these thoughts and feelings. That will only increase our difficulty.
세코로고 로지 리카보노지 공카보노지 쭈마 할래야게네스치디스.
In its bare state, the mind's nature is similar to a white cloth or freshly fallen snow, pure, untainted.
마리바 강가 세토야. 어다 네셋 강가 시토야 그런지 치트스.
And because of that, it has the nature to be able to clear away, to defeat ignorance and all the other afflictions.
이나요 다 실로니 쭉 빠빠노지 다 빠빠모모 지금 알아서 네셋 강가 관이 되듯이.
But its nature, its fundamental nature is obscured. Just like the part of the onion in the center is obscured by the skin and various layers.
로로소소 로조도 뇨레라테네 테니 빠빠티치 파 셴넬라 사세
So our task through our study and practice is, to peel away these various layers, to be able to reveal the mind's true nature and tap into its ultimate potential.
Kadina kayong watching the death hoya, Kadina taki watching the death hoya, Tashulpa, to be so much.
To lead the mind in a direction where, through its vastness, we are able to maintain a relaxed and happy state all of the time.
Roger Kangalata, Pembada Toyata, Tanishu, Yabochilpa, so much.
To bring the mind into the direction where it can become of true benefit. May it be able to benefit myself and others. In order to actualize this, we will make praises and requests to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas for their blessings. So we'll do the prayers. Mandala offering is next. Refuge in bodhicitta.
Sonje jidong soje jona la shonju bada dane jaso jo dagi nibi sono je dola be sonje dowa jo sonje jidong soje jona shonju bada dane jaso jo dagi chije jime sono Yola Beja Sonje Dowa Jo Sonje Jidon Sojo Jono Choje Bada Dane Jaso Jo Dagi Chije Ni Sono Je Dola Me Sonje Dowa Jo Oya, 다 나로서트는 밀려 버텔 다 단절라 님벌레 도바시 되는 소리 예서 바카치 뭐 이사레스.
So bring forth the important thought, thinking having achieved this precious human rebirth, I want to engage with what will allow me to take its essence.
저도 로조가 년도노라 예지 대지 하레스. 단절라 어떤 단조 대체 얘가 아니 야가 같이 못 지레스 그냥 같이 뭐.
And in terms of the preliminaries that we talked about related to this text, one of them, of course, is this precious human rebirth, recognizing its greatness, its rarity, and its importance.
야 단조금 물린데 tul아 못도네 다 가디이나 보게 가르스 가르다. If
one already has within one's mind stream an awareness of this preciousness of this human rebirth and a determination to then take its essence, then meditating on this preliminary is not as important. So what will happen is through contemplating how this human rebirth is something that is difficult to find and has great meaning, one will come to the conclusion that if I don't make the most of this opportunity, that would be a great loss. So if one finds that one is lazy or unmotivated in one's practice a lot of the time, then really you have no choice but to meditate first on this preliminary about the precious human rebirth. What happens is one familiarizes oneself with the difficulty of finding a human rebirth, in other words, its rarity, as well as its great meaning, and thinks about this again and again. What gradually emerges is that if I don't practice well, then day to day, month to month, this precious opportunity is slowly slipping away. It is being wasted, and that would not be all right. So this kind of awareness will come into the mind. But actually, this is not such an easy realization to bring forth. If we look at most of the people in the world, we see that in fact they are engaged in activities which are not deriving the meaning of this human rebirth, or even kind of squandering it. So how do we establish what will allow us to take the essence of the great meaning of this human rebirth? What allows us to take the essence is to engage with what is wholesome in a complete way in the beginning, middle, and end. And so then think, proceeding in this way, paying attention so that the beginning, middle, and end of my practice will be complete. I will cultivate and study in this way. I will bring the body and mind into a peaceful, calm state. I will So think about this self now. Turn your attention to this self and think about how it's been circling or spinning on this wheel of samsara. Sometimes this self has occupied a happy realm. Sometimes it's occupied a suffering, lower realm. But no matter how many times we've turned around this wheel of samsara, we haven't been able to find that stable, lasting happiness. We've experienced the happiness of devas, those in the God realms, many times. We've experienced every happiness of human beings imaginable. But because these are samsaric experiences of happiness, they haven't been something stable, something meaningful. Geshe How wonderful it would be if I could use this opportunity to get off that wheel and to establish a meaningful peace and happiness for myself and contribute to a meaningful peace and happiness for others. I will definitely do this. In order for myself and others to be able to establish all sentient beings in a lasting state of peace and happiness, I must take this self, this I, and actualize bodhicitta and full enlightenment. Whatever negative minds or afflictions are within me, I can definitely completely purify and overcome them. Why? Because I am able to activate the supreme antidote of wisdom realizing emptiness, which is completely supported by perfect reasonings. Self-cherishing, ignorance grasping at the self, have no grounding in solid reasoning. Therefore, with wisdom, I can completely clear them away. So we'll pause there. Oh, okay. So remember that for that self to actualize bodhisattvahood, to actualize Buddhahood, we need to cultivate these two things of merit and wisdom. So how does that fit in with these mind training or lojong teachings? When we cultivate the method side of the mind training or lojong teachings, we are mainly cultivating the self-cherishing attitude. And the practices of method allow us to activate the vastness of our mind, to cultivate that open-mindedness, which is the opposite of this self-cherishing, which is very narrowing, very tight, and very limited. And we see this. The more narrow the focus is on ourselves, the tighter the mind becomes, the more suffering and problems we experience. We can see this. And on the wisdom side, through the lojong teachings, we practice wisdom realizing emptiness, which is able to defeat that root of the ignorance grasping at the self. And then we can make great progress. So we should think, what kind of work is there better than this? What topic of study is there better than this? And that's the attitude with which we approach the text. And remember that the root text composed by Geshe Chekawa is the Lojong du Dunma, the 7-point mind training, which is really summarizing the important slogans of the mind training in 7 essences. And Geshe Chekawa instructs us first, train in the preliminaries. The commentary mentions that the preliminaries are 5 in number. We discussed those previously. Those are quite important. So preliminaries is exactly what the word means. The preliminaries are the preparation. Just like if you want to enjoy a delicious meal, you want to chop and prepare all of the ingredients well. And we'll find that when we pay attention to the preliminary part of the session, then the actual session itself will go a lot more smoothly with far fewer difficulties. So along with this, then we have the 4 of the preliminaries that
nga
bring
nga
us.
yarda karafo.
Mare di tambo. So it's like, why did you say 4? And I was like, because I said 4 in addition to the one we just said. So, but his English is getting good now. So you're in good hands. If Kedrup messes up, you know he'll catch it. So to come to a total of 5, we have these 4 points of the freedoms and endowments of a precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, cause and effect or karma, and finally the faults of samsara, of cyclic existence. So let's look at how these fit together. We know, okay, so the freedoms and endowments of this precious human life, when I meditate on it, that gives me the determination to take the essence of this human life. When I meditate on death and impermanence, what that does is it adds a sense of urgency. I need to take the essence of this life now while I have the chance. So taking the plans we have for practice for next year into this year, the plans we have for practice for next month into this month, the plans of practice we have for next week into this week. That's how that sense of urgency works. So therefore, death and impermanence doesn't need to be like a scary or unpleasant thing to meditate on when we think about its function. Its function is to bring forth this attitude thinking, I must, as much as possible, practice right now, right? While I have the chance, before I pass. And actually we see, right, how kind of uncertain that time of our passing is, because no matter what our age, is there anyone who could here today who could say 100% for sure they're not going to die by tomorrow? No, none of us could. Yeah. And so therefore, if because of this sense of urgency, you cultivated those merits today, if you have to pass away tomorrow, right, you're going to be in a better situation. One will feel I'm well prepared for tomorrow. One will feel relaxed. So preparing for the next life is much like preparing for a journey, going somewhere else. We need to amass all of the things that we will need. We need to make sure we have enough funds. We have preparations for food, accommodation, and so forth. We need to similarly prepare for the next life. So then on the basis of this, we have a good preparation or training in the preliminaries. And so you may ask, preliminaries to what? Coming before what? In this case, we could say preliminaries to bringing forth bodhicitta. And we can see from our own experience, if we just try to sit down right away and meditate on love and compassion effectively, that's not always going to be easy. It's better to have preliminary points in place. And also we know that in terms of preliminaries to the main event, which is bringing forth bodhicitta, that this bodhicitta has 2 aspects, right? Relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Yeah. So also when we speak when we speak about ultimate bodhicitta, okay, sorry. So yeah, I said just ultimate bodhicitta. Geshe said no. Sorry, relative and ultimate bodhicitta both, but this holds especially, he's saying, for ultimate bodhicitta. We can divide the practice into 2, right? Practice during meditative equipoise and practice outside of meditative equipoise. Another way of saying this, Geshe said, is practice during the session and practice when not in session.
다 대도 그 깔래 카완다고 다 시가르베 이자 다 대도 될 녀적이니까 똥바조 똥비차 조소노도 야레스.
And so we approach this first from the point of view of ultimate bodhicitta because it's a little bit trickier to understand. So when we talk about the practice while in equipoise, the practice is abiding on emptiness itself, abiding on that emptiness.
다 이도니까 똥바 예비티네 조 텐데 슈체가.
Then outside of the session, right, based upon that focusing on emptiness during the session, outside of the session, we can think about how things are empty because of dependent arising.
다 대노지 던지니까 다조 똥바 되지. 어느 저거니까 다 텐데가 돈이 다조 똥바 예비티네 텐데 소노도나 어느 다 같이 주 침보식이 아니.
So you could try practicing like this actually, that during equipoise, or for most of us during the meditation session, we're focusing on the empty side of things. And then post meditation, as we're kind of going about our daily activities, we can contemplate dependent arising. And as we spoke about at length with the last text, right, we understand that emptiness and dependent arising, they support, they reinforce each other.
다 되네. 다 녀적이니까 세는 누구겠니까 똥바 조소네 똥비쇼테 다 똥손테 땡보냐 그러마도 다 딜 땡딜 주도잖아.
So the thing here is that during equipoise or in the meditation session, we understand that here we're talking mainly about placement meditation. So when we're doing placement meditation, we want to remain on that object of emptiness single-pointedly. So if we were to do a lot of analysis with dependent arising and so forth, that would disturb that placement meditation.
단 주고 돈이는 주고니까 네 돈이 거요. 좋아하다고도. 언제 돈만이래 나고 좋아되지 주도 때는 제이가.
So an important point here about feelings that arise during meditation. If you're meditating on emptiness and you think, wow, now I'm really meditating on emptiness, or you feel, wow, now I'm really getting into emptiness. What does that mean? It means you're not meditating on emptiness, because your mind is supposed to be single-pointedly on that object of emptiness. This is very important. So thinking about like, wow, this is such a cool feeling that I'm having in relation to emptiness. That's actually a pretty serious obstacle to your meditation, because you want to be focused on on the emptiness single-pointedly. This is a key point. So what we have to do, right, in order to have this placement meditation really successful is engage in this preliminary of analytical meditation. And specifically at that time, we want to pay attention to identifying that object of negation. So we think like, what would it be like if things were truly existent, if they existed from their own side, if there was a pinpointable essence, right? We identify what we're negating in that analytical meditation.
다때 매바 들어가는 걸 다 세야 돼. 많이 누구서나
디 라던 칸데다고레스 난서 탐보치 켄에 데네 케페젤라
선미 과자 로지 지원아 미과 로지 지원아 든지 지요 가래서 오다 든지 만두와 선바진 거 사세 가래.
Oh, okay. So I think I understand. Yeah, 나체나 난서 디 라디 칸데스 치그레스 디 다보레스 데네
세시 언데로 농보체 지요 농보체 든지 지요 가라. 스테 만두와 선다 걸 보게세.
Okay. Yes. I understand. So, so it's a little bit. So Geshe is drawing an analogy. Sorry, I got confused for a moment. He's drawing an analogy with deity yoga. When we are trying to like bring forth a conception of this object of negation during our analytical meditation, it's a little bit like we try to generate as a deity. We think like this is what the deity looks like. So we think this is what something that exists inherently would be like. This is what something that exists from its own side would be like. Then, when having engaged in that analytical meditation, we think, but it is empty from existing in that way at all. Then we do placement meditation on that emptiness. When we do our analytical meditation on emptiness, this is very, very important. All that is within the mind is that sky-like emptiness. That is what we are paying attention to. So we dawn in the mind that sky-like emptiness, and that's what we remain on. We don't think, how nice is that sky? What kind of feeling arises with that sky? Oh, look, there's an airplane, there's a bird, right? We're not doing that, right? We are just abiding on that single point of view. So are we saying that you're not allowed to do that at all? That you're not allowed to experience those feelings or observe what's going on in the sky? No, absolutely not. What we're saying is that outside of equipoise, we observe what's happening in the sky and we can say, this is happening, I'm feeling this. But during that placement meditation, this is not the time to be doing that.
This one?
So that's just a key point, that's a very important point Geshe wanted to share. So in terms of where we are in the text, we have covered transforming adversity into the path through relative bodhicitta. So we are at the bottom of page 8, by the way, for folks who are following along, in the commentary by Gyalse Tokme Zangpo. So today's topic is transforming adversity into the path of enlightenment through ultimate bodhicitta. So Geshe said that, he's really struggling with his hay fever today. We've tried all types of medications at this point.
Yeah.
So Geshe said he's gotten 2 good medicines. So I think he wants to thank, because I think the person who sent one of these is here actually. So he thanks the person and it has kind of helped it, but he hasn't been able to take the medications frequently, like enough, regularly. So yeah, we're going to try that. So Geshe said that the medicine is actually functioning as his dharma protector against the allergies at this point. Yep. Transforming adversity into the path of enlightenment through ultimate bodhicitta, the root text says, meditating on delusory perceptions as the 4 kayas is the unsurpassable shunyata protection. So shunyata is the Sanskrit for emptiness, in case some folks are unfamiliar. So there are all types of appearances. There are all types of thoughts arising in relation to those appearances, which kind of confuse us, which start kind of like a whole meaningless unfolding. So when we're experiencing that, right, from these appearances, a difficulty, right, an unfolding of many appearances and a disturbance, we think that whatever is arising, whether it is good or bad, although it may seem so, none of these things exist from their own side at all. So to think that this bad appearance, for example, it is not inherently existence. If I were to try to pinpoint a thoroughly existent essence, I would not be able to find it. This is actually one of the supreme ways to transform adversity into the path to enlightenment.
다 된다 뒤지 가르치기 요하르서는 안조 내서 다 버게 내서 가르쳐 봐 내서 누가 다 강연하고 중앙이나 나저 말이 바티가 로바 첨보지 존은 안조 강에 뒤 첨보지 존으로 요하르.
So what we have to understand, right, is that when we kind of encounter various difficulties and obstacles, what's happening is that ignorance grasping at the self is functioning to kind of inflate, to worsen that obstacle. Sorry, just give me a moment. Sorry, my apologies.
이늘에 하고서 다시 강에서는 뭐 내서 제비갈 대용해야 돼요. 나사야 돼. 나 코로 내서 보게 내서 주주지 알아. 이 토르도 쫙 만다고 같이
So we think that that outer appearance, right? This has been exaggerated based upon this conception of the I or the self. And it is almost like I have kind of put an armor on top of that appearance outside, exaggerating it.
말이 빠가 나 코로 쫙 만다고 전에 top 때문에 쉬워져서 차와이자. 나 노아 누가 수나 할 레벨 top 지노아 샤인 거야.
And because of this ignorance and the way it is functioning, then that difficult appearance or thing outside, it is being kind of reified and solidified. That's what's happening.
다 강에 코로 차 야샤점마도 매나 야샤 그때들 하보서가 말이 바티.
So what's happening is ignorance is taking that external thing. And in terms of what's happening from the side of the thing or the circumstance that's upsetting us, we could say that 10% of what's happening there with the appearance may be coming from the side of the thing, but 90% we can connect to an exaggeration associated with this ignorance grasping at the self.
다 대단다 뭐지 셀 빠져서 기셀 레벨 빠져서 기나 뭐지가 가로질라 도기도 왔어.
And so also this way of thinking has been seen as kind of beneficial also by many cognitive science, other people that look out at the mind, maybe not necessarily spiritual.
다 디님에서 된다 대쟁을 저절로 이제 뚜만이라 때문에 대쟁에 강가 로드 좋아 계시기 잘해.
So this is kind of just a beginning way to take that obstacle, that difficult experience, and transform it into the path to enlightenment using ultimate bodhicitta or emptiness.
지수때 네모 봐도 현노 내지저 네발라 땜비 둥아 공시용 하고서 네모 봐도 현노 내지저 네발라 땜비 둥아 공시용 네모 봐도 둥아 더 통제 롱게 세 트이노한데 연비
So as we continue, whenever we experience mental afflictions or suffering caused by harm from the outer environment or beings within it, these afflictions and sufferings are delusory perceptions of our own mind. They lack even slightest true existence. So in terms of the outer environment, right, let's think about this for a moment. The outer environment is things like the houses, forests, and other objects. And of course, from their side, they don't try to harm, but we can see that there are appearances.
소화도 새도 요 말아왔어. 이란이 걸어서는 내반다마다가 요 알아왔어. 지인지바 메인지바 다른 용도 왔어.
So the outer environment doesn't have a particular mind or intention, but based upon manifestations, for example, fires, floods, and so forth, the external environment is definitely something that can disturb the mind.
어따 틱톡 가르치기 하는 거로서 죽은 놈 누가 말해 누가 덴바레 해서 어떻게 자체 우리하는
누가 말했어?
누가 덴바레스
Yeah. And so within the Four Noble Truths, we would say that these are those kind of, these are a manifestation of those true sufferings. And we understand that as they are true sufferings, right, that this means ultimately, if we trace it back, these are arising due to karma and affliction, right?
오다 코야 때든지 이상한도 코유되고 할레비탄이 다 보야 보자 템보야 보냐 그러마도 당하로서 레도 와 친구야.
And also very important to explain, right? They're related to karma and affliction. This also means that we have to protect our environment and our surroundings, because if we engage in negative activities related to them, right, this can create karma for disasters and so forth to unfold.
어떤 대화 쳐봐도 주시 쳐봐라 때문에 다시 네 그런 대화 쳐봐 매바 손으로 돈에 되는 담만다 손에 다녀다 뭐
So we see that because of excessive attachment, right, or because of greed, thinking that somehow we are separate from our environment, we may exploit it in various ways. But of course, ultimately, this has consequences.
그러니까 계속 떼질렀다니다 마고비 강에 저 맞춰봐 이때 통통이야.
Sometimes people are so kind of fixated on just withdrawing the resource and the profit in the short term that they don't think about how that could play out in the long term. Actually, the way to think about it is to think about this abode, right, of the world, of the earth which we dwell upon, as being like a living, breathing body. That's how we should think about it. So we know if someone just like pinches us or disturbs our body just a little bit, that this can cause a greater disturbance. The same is true of this world or this physical environment. And so we see in the Buddha's teachings, right, lots of measures about protecting the environment, about the importance of planting various healthy crops and fruits and so forth, about taking care of the surroundings. These are an established principle. And so that's why in the Vinaya, for example, it's also, if we follow very closely, actually novices and also fully ordained monks and nuns, we're not supposed to cut the limbs of trees and so forth, right? If we're observing strictly. So that's all related to kind of this fundamental attitude of respect for the environment. Yeah, so such relative appearances are comparable to a dream in which we are burnt by a fire or drowned by water. It would be an error to mistake what is unreal for reality. So Geshe just reading that again, they lack even the slightest true existence. They are comparable to a dream. It would be an error to mistake what is unreal for reality. So here we have to be careful, right? Because if we just emphasize this dream analogy too much, we might think that, okay, that means that there's nothing there at all, right? And that can take us into a different direction. We understand that there is something that is nominally there. So when we talk about things being like a dream and we insist that things are not there, what we have to understand is that we are talking about that appearance of those things as existing from their own side. That's an important distinction. Otherwise, we might think we're saying there's nothing there at all. Yeah. Otherwise, also we could think that it's a little bit doesn't make any sense. How can we say that there's nothing there at all, right? So it's important to distinguish this. Yeah. So also when we use examples, right? The examples, what's Geshe saying? Yeah, those examples are kind of pointing us into the right direction. but they can't always be taken completely literally. That's important.
pena ta ko tumani sa go sa le la wo mya sa pe ja ya le la wo mya sa to ni gong ba no ka gong ba go sa xie xing do na ni ji ma to yu to.
So for example, actually, we just touched on one. Meditating, emptiness and the sky are not the same, right? But because it's difficult to kind of come to this object of emptiness in meditation and be able to hold on to it, to kind of give a conception of it, we say that sky like emptiness. So that's kind of like an analogy that's kind of pointing us in the right direction.
Oh yeah, this one.
Loso.
Oh, te dong ba no chi to je jing yong zhe ba me bi nian mo som lu nga di ngo la ta na ha ko song. Du nga ka chi ju kan ri shi ngo la pa tang ge ta nga no to le te mo ta wa no ji ta wa yi na te to mo ne go ne ma shi bi xie wa me ba chi ju ge.
Yeah. And so now we come into an analogy which is using the 4 bodies or the 4 kayas of a Buddha. All phenomena ultimately lack true reality. So look into the essence of any mental affliction or experience of suffering. Since it does not arise from anywhere in the beginning, it is the unborn Dharmakaya.
This one. Ta to tombo ni ko ronji xie me ai sa ma xie wa lan gua ji me ai sa go ba me ba. Ani ta de long go.
Ale. And similarly, what is unarisen does not cease, right? If something arises, it can't kind of stop. So that is the unceasing Sambhogakaya.
Hako sare.
Yeah.
Ta longka se de noji longka se de ko manji ba ko tembo de ki sa. Longka se ya. So longka se na noji ina.
Yeah. Korwa degyo mare dagshin la
degyo. Ko manji ba da. Ko ma to ba ko tembo de ke tel longka se ya.
So Geshe is just drawing your attention to something about the Sambhogakaya or the enjoyment body. Specifically, what he's saying is that this enjoyment body is said to abide until the end of samsara mazo badu.
Oh, yes. Ko mazo bada.
Yeah.
Ko se che ke ko tembo de ke la long se.
Or until samsara is empty, that Sambhogakaya body abides to try to bring benefit to beings.
Oh, that de chi ka chi ma su di se chi ju de yo ma long se ha de.
Chikyang that kind of zodu then So at the time that samsara is empty of beings, which may happen, right, very long in the future, then that body will dissipate. But otherwise, it abides unceasingly. So that's what is meant by unceasing here.
So that's
why, as a tantric practitioner, right, we talked about the tantric version of the 7 limbs, which was it the 7 Vajra points? What was it called? I forget now. But anyways, those 7 points, we don't need to make a request to turn the Dharma wheel or not to pass away, right? Because the Sambhogakaya body is abiding unceasingly.
Don't need to request
not to pass away, nor to turn the wheel, because the Sambhogakaya is always there. As long as sentient beings are around, that Sambhogakaya, that enjoyment body, is unceasing. However, it is said that only Arya Bodhisattvas can truly see the Sambhogakaya. This is another important point. Okay. Ko chuku mendrawa dabochi gyore choki chuku re de choki chuku sena karete ko perna tak denso chatsam So Geshe said that, of course, the Buddha, he would have achieved this Sambhogakaya, this enjoyment body, right? But he had to come into this world to benefit beings. Understanding that beings would not be able to see him, he manifested this Nirmanakaya, the emanation body. And so I said to Geshe, when we speak about Buddha Shakyamuni, I asked him a question. When we speak about Buddha Shakyamuni, we talk about the supreme emanation body or the supreme Nirmanakaya. So what distinguishes it as supreme? So it's all these signs and marks. So I misunderstood, thinking it was the marks and signs that designate it as supreme. It is not. In fact, it is through that body accomplishing the 12 deeds that designates it as supreme. So that's an interesting point there.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, the Tande Koro, Takoro, Janimbo Sachi Yamara, or that could me tabaji with the mother, the Lila Desmondus.
So Geshe also said, keep in mind, we're also using examples, right? This is not actually a commentary on the 4 bodies. We're talking about using them as examples. So that's important.
Oh, machine this one. Tashango Mebala, but the Nipa Meba, the Choko.
Yeah. Since what neither arises nor ceases does not remain in the interim, it is the non-abiding Nirmanakaya. Dice na nyanglen ne mi de pala droa. Mi nepa.
Shango Mebala, but the Nipa Meba, but the Matapic Nipa Yoba.
Ale. So this non-abiding is actually, in this analogy, helping us point to that lack of true existence. And since they are indivisible essence, it is the swabhavivakaya. So the swabhavivakaya, that's a very long Sanskrit word. The translation I like best for it, you'll see different ones, is nature truth body. Nature truth body. And so when we talk about them being indivisible, right, we understand that those 4 bodies are indivisible. Ultimately, they're of one essence. And we also understand that all of these 4 bodies arise from that sphere of emptiness. Viewing delusory perceptions as the 4 Buddha bodies in this way is known as the instruction on recognizing the 4 kayas. Whatever harms us also proves to be very kind, since it inspires our training in the 2 types of bodhicitta. So that's because if we are just abiding in samsara happily without any difficulties, right, we're just going to continue humming along happily. We're not going to have kind of the impetus, right, to experience those problems and want to get out of samsara to produce the 2 types of bodhicitta. That's why it says in so many of the instructions, right, that if you want liberation, then meditate upon the faults of samsara, of cyclic existence. And that's the same reason that within the 4 Arya truths, or the 4 noble truths, the Buddha mentions suffering. He mentions the difficult one first. He doesn't talk about the good stuff first, right? He wants to motivate us. And so that knowledge of suffering, right, that's to put us on the path, to put us on the right path so that we can achieve the good aims. So we think to the problem, you are kind because you have helped me motivate myself for liberation. You have placed me on the path of the bodhisattva practice. You have placed me on the path to enlightenment. In this way, what is seemingly difficult is actually transformed. And so, to kind of stabilize and understand those points, we'll now turn our discussion to the 400 verses of Aryadeva. So for those of you who are following, we are on chapter 12, which begins with verse 276. I think we're on 280 or 281. Okay. So Geshe thinks we didn't complete the explanation of 278, so let us begin there. So that's the 3rd one down.
하고서 다 술로가 니는 저 계좌 가르쳐 버렸어. 지금 말이 비슷한 바들레스. 다냐. 그래서 아니 남아요 벌써 줘봐. 로마요 벌써 줘봐이나. 하고서 아니 대니 신이 되네 대체 대요 벌써 줘봐. 써대요나. 손지 소소 라빠노는 뇌사 계좌들 나와서.
So 276 and 277 verse numbers, they brought to mind something that Lord Milarepa said, which is when a lama possesses the necessary qualities, a student possesses the necessary qualities, and the practice of relying on a teacher is sound, it is as if you are abiding in the palm of the Buddha's hand.
But
of course, that is not easy. And so that is why in the last session, Geshe spoke about all of the qualities necessary for the listener of the Dharma, but also he spoke about the qualities necessary for the speaker of the Dharma. So really being kind-minded and possessing a pure intention, these are very essential.
Oh, this. That's to look at Sumba.
Yep, Sumba.
Tochi Tui Yangele Dawa Yatse Gun Dawa Yatse Gun de Kusun Jala Tadana Mugan Jawa Jitchi Mugan Jawa Jitchi.
So these strange people all agree that by giving up everything, one attains nirvana. For what reason do they dislike that which puts an end to all?
하고서 다 리지 그랬더니 다 토지 리동아이나 강갈 리동아이나 하고서라 어느 타바 토그레스 내시 자그드스.
So some people say that if you just put everything aside completely, merely from that one will achieve nirvana or liberation.
다 대우조 때 릴 강에 제비 돈이라. 하고서라 구하도 라파르죠 안다고자 어다 마세 어다 던디다 만다서네라 다 살레비 시시발하네 말아 어다 던디 그 돈에는 내저 가야라 포용보 대절녀다지 어다 던디 조조서네 걸어 깔래자 시기도 다대
So Geshe is linking this view that we think that we have to give up everything and merely by that we are liberated, right? So this is an extreme. And so for example, some people thinking that, okay, we have to give up this corporeal form, this body, they engage in all different kinds of practices of mortification of the flesh, like harming themselves, causing pain to themselves in various ways. But that is not how one achieves liberation. And of course, those practitioners, along with those austerities, they may be practicing other really very sound things. But the important point to understand here is that mortification to one's bodily form is not going to bring one closer to liberation. So that's what's being explained in the first two lines of 278. For what reason do they dislike that which puts an end to all? So the Buddha is not teaching that mortification, right? The Buddha explains that the problem is within the mind, specifically our mode of apprehension. This problem is rooted in the ignorance grasping at the self. So by defeating this ignorance grasping at the self, one can achieve liberation. This is the key point. So some people, when this is explained, right, they dislike this line of reasoning. So it's kind of a lament here. What's the reason that they would dislike this profound instruction? Right?
지시 동안 셰반저 디나 네바 아니 토바이 옌더쇼와 매지수
How will one who does not know the means to give it up do so? Certainly, therefore, the subduer has said, there is no peace in any other teaching.
오다 릴 강에 때가르 강가 파뽕가레 내쳐 뽕가레 콘도 다 대지 뽕가레 테니 테니 다 당길라바 노지 릴 강에 때니라 내쳐 뽕 콘도 뽕 하고서라 다 강가 뽕사데 아니 다테 또도 마시와레스다.
So what we have to get rid of is the afflictions of attachment, anger, ignorance, and so forth, right? By achieving these, we will meet the goal. But the means of that is not, who does not know the means of achieving that, of overcoming that anger and so forth. We're not going to be able to do that by mortification of the body.
하고서래 오다 젠다 가르목이 가르잖아 나한테 말이 바테 고템보스네 대바이네 쇼와니 디노요 토요 말에서는 손이 쪼된 되게 됐습니다.
No matter what we do, no matter what kind of extreme lengths we go to trying to reduce these afflictions, if we do not target and uproot the ignorance grasping at the self, liberation cannot be achieved, right? That is what the Buddha is instructing.
옌데 쇼와메 쇼와세를 타발했습니다. 답이다와.
Otherwise, there is no peace in any other teaching. So this peace, of course, is a way of speaking about nirvana, of speaking about liberation.
리송아 다 묘테레 다 줄게 진도는 살아와. 손지지수 공지지 공시 태조현자와 대의 또 많이 되든 너니 거나 이치샤.
Whoever doubts what the Buddha said about that which is hidden should rely on emptiness and gain conviction in him alone.
오다 소지 쪼된데 다 렌데스 오다 미야 가침버 자침버 샤왕아시 세 가침버 세한다고도 덴바시 세한다고 다 대지 에서 뭐뭐지 하고서라와 오다 손지 그 공부 세한다고 다더니 에서 뭐뭐 대지를 가시 태도 사가요나 동부 뚱만이 될 거게 대지 제바 세잖아 하고서라와 때문에 될라되는 강가를 보게 도밤에 바지도 태도 제바 준 거래.
So should rely on emptiness. So this is explaining that Buddha Shakyamuni, right? He propounded teachings on many topics, right? On cause and effect, on past and future lifetimes, on the method side of the path, and so forth. So some of these things, right? Cause and effect, past and future lives. I guess what Geshe is saying is that these are examples of what is hidden. So if you can't gain conviction in that, you might say, like, how do I know that is true? Well, if we have those doubts, we should first examine the teachings on emptiness. By seeing that those teachings on emptiness are sound, then we can gain conviction in the Buddha's teachings.
하고서래 오다 강가를 보게 이시라야 될라요. 하고서라 오다 뚱만이를 좋아서 로소나 강가를 드는 이시 때문에 라얀두스.
So the principle is that if we are able to really develop conviction in this teaching of emptiness, then based upon that, a faith will be able to arise in the otother teachings.
오다 단다이나에 달려바게 세리바레 세코르바게 세리바레 세리바다 코로슈리 메비 세리바 피타버지 다 할래야.
And so kind of this method of investigation or analysis, it has the character of being scientific, right? And so many of the sort of more unbiased scientists, right? I guess Geshe means like unbiased towards religion. They really see that this is kind of a very desirable approach.
소치
Yeah. So in cognitive science, previously, it was explained that, like, I don't know, it was explained that there was kind of some there was some kind of a force or some kind of abiding principle that was ruling over the mind, yeah? But if one examines the various mental processes, this idea of like a principle kind of in charge of the mind or a lord of the mind, this begins to crumble. Therefore, this cognitive scientist remarked that if you think about it from that perspective, right, of these processes, then really saying that there is no self, these teachings on selflessness, the Buddhists are really onto something. Yes. Yeah. So the many other kind of similar interactions with various scientists. And some speak about how the scientific view of the mind and so forth is quite similar to what we find in Chittamanjana and mind-only philosophy. Others explain how it's quite similar to what we find in the Majjhimika, right? The middle way philosophies. Nipa kare. So Geshe has explained to me a scientific philosophy that talked about the kind of positive power of the mind and the positive power of this mind kind of hitting a wall. In other words, not being able to grow and improve. Yeah. It wouldn't be able to improve after about the age of 20. However, this positive force within the mind, and Geshe can't remember, it may be like serotonin or something like that. This positive force within the mind, saying people weren't able to increase it after the age of 20. This kind of was proven incorrect because it was measured that people who meditate are actually able to increase its presence within the mind. So one of the teachers at Seraje, Gendunya, he explained that really from scientists observing this, they were really seeing that there was something to the practice of meditation. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama said sort of all of the kind of efforts that I've been pushing about the links with science and so forth, this ended up being beneficial. Yeah. Yeah. So that should be something that's a little bit encouraging for us. Yeah. So people who are having doubts, difficulties with certain aspects of the Buddha's teaching, the advice here is to explain about emptiness, and then seeing the reasonableness of emptiness, they may be later able to appreciate other aspects of the teaching. And so just to use this principle, to be very clear, one doesn't even necessarily have to be formally a Buddhist, right? To use these principles, investigation, these ways of thinking and come to benefit, right? This can be done by anyone. So there's one kind of account story that Geshe wanted to share in connection with this, but we will save it for next time. Have to make sure folks come back, right? So it's an example. So thanks very much. Let us do the dedication prayers. And then if you need to go get on with your day, please do, but you're welcome to say for questions as well. Jongjo semjo rimbo je maje banam je jor je jewa nyamba meba yo kone kondo ewa shun tongni tawa
Rinpoche, Maje Panam, Shenjoche, Jewa Nyamba, Meba Yang, Gone Gonda Bewa Shu, Jambe Pao Jida Jemba Dong, Gonda Zangpo, Deyon Deje Deda Gongi, Jisu Dalo Je, Gewa Dida, Tanjira Dongo, Disu Shepe, Gyawa Tanje Je, Ngova Kangla, Chodo Ngova De, Dagi Gewe, Tsawa Nigu Jon, Zangpo Cheche, Rabdu Ngova Jo. Roger Kangi Gawako, Sabate, that Kangi Chilatas, the Shiki just on Basumbo. Honey, Shombat, Nijititashi to have a
Through the virtues of myself and others, may the cause of all happiness, the mind of kindness, be able to be brought forth by all beings.
Yoaji never. Ota never candy, Gina, your tando, took that never candy Gina, Pashi,
Through the force of these merits, may any imbalances in the four elements, the environment, causing harm to beings, may these be completely cleared away.
Lichikangi, Senjikangi, Kandi, Gionata, Kangashini Pata, she didn't initially down to
May all the physical and mental suffering of beings be completely cleared away, and may they be peaceful in body and mind.
Rurososo in a Sendel Trishiatoba. Shivani Shavata, Triaposheto,
May I, from lifetime to lifetime, be able to be one who benefits all beings.
Shombato Niji Tindika Kolata, Masendel Kaze, Tatapacha Bataka, Zumbosh, Yaposhu, so much.
I am fortunate to have been able to cultivate all of the causes of love and compassion. So we'll pause there. Excuse me, give me a moment. I don't know if I was hearing things, but I thought I heard a knock on the door. Yeah, no, Geshe also heard it. So I just want to make sure that.
Yes, well, that's happening. And before we have our question and answer, just wanted to mention that we have a few events during the rest of the week. One of them is Tuesday evening. We have a literature circle. We're studying Lama Zopa Rinpoche's commentary on the Six Perfections. And also at the Burlington Public Library, 1 p.m., we have Geshe in-person event on how we can work with anger and decrease the minds of anger. This is in person at the Burlington Public Library. And then lastly, just a brief word from our sponsor, the Mind of Generosity. So we offer everything free. This is a generous act so that we can, so Lamia Yesheling as an organization can cultivate the virtue of generosity. And this allows you also to do so. And we rely entirely on small donations from our membership for everything we do. Thank you so much. So any questions?
So yes, go ahead if there are questions. Sorry about that. It was the, I'm embarrassed to admit ordering from Amazon, but it was the Amazon man. Might as well be honest. Yes. Any questions? Okay. Is there anything on social media, Dave?
Some expressions of gratitude.
I think Sue has it up as a question.
Suzette, yes, go ahead, please.
I was thinking about during the meditation, I was thinking about the enjoyment body. And it goes from lifetime to lifetime. What is the cause? Where did it arise from in the first?
What's the cause of the enjoyment body, and where did it arise from? Did I get that right?
Condition? What's the dependent arising that has brought this endless enjoyment body until samsara ends?
Yeah.
What brought it in the first place?
I gotcha. Nganso di longku seria di roa ko kandesa gore tempo chene korwa mazo bardu degire dua di dempa yina roa dene tendrel karela tene chungores korongi gyudang kien karela tene chungores karinsena halepe rimpo di dea kewa dea tuze rimpo ne dua roa dene di gyudang kiendang tendrel kandesta uchi yongresa.
Mimi ta dedo pena sojo dende yina ta tombon do chibola tene kache tromesal sosa swas o ta jetso chi te chires.
So the first part of the answer is the great accumulation of merits, right, as the cause for this. So we know that in the sutra presentation, right, the Buddha had to engage in accumulation of merits for 3 incalculable eons. So there's a lot of merit behind it.
하고서래 어다 지조 다 디니 야사더니 다 졸로가 니까를 좀 받더니 지션주만 다 다시 다 벌써 줘 봐시라 벌써 줘 봐. 졸로 돌로 골로 가까래 뭐 자사와 이자 손지 쓰이나요. 그 이제 녀도 저용이야. 그래서
And also to understand that it's not entirely separate from any of the other 4 bodies that were mentioned in the text, because all of these can be connected with the development of the Buddha's love and compassion, right? Developing wisdom, completing the paths of accumulation, preparation, and no more learning, right? All of these steps lead to the arising of all of the 3 kayas or the 4 kayas or bodies.
다 되도 빼나 사람 문이 와서 다 디세 리월 패셔와 몸보스 그랬어. 다시 와도 남는다와. 어당이 현재 요소를 띠떠다 다 보게 편바적이 지시의 하고서라 어다 대화 적이 있으면 다 길레존에 봐. And
also the power of the vow or the promise, thinking that these Buddhas, when they're bodhisattvas and so forth, they cultivate from lifetime to lifetime, thinking that may I complete these accumulations of merit and so forth so that I can speak the Dharma, so that I can act in the way that is supremely beneficial to all beings, right? So that is part of the story as well.
하고서래 어다 손지 쓰이나를 손지 지 말다 손지 쓰이나요 로크세한테 다
So all of the Buddhas possess this enjoyment body or this sambhogakaya, right? And this is how it is brought forth. 아니 텐제 디세나 같이 당나되기래베. So I want to ask, because Sue, your question brought up a thought for me, which is that we know that at the end of samsara, this sambhogakaya is no longer present. So is that maybe the answer to your point about dependent arising? And is the dependent arising sentient beings? So I'm going to ask Geshe that. Nanso tenje la tene kandes yongyoris. Semchen tang tenje chi gyoris. Karin sena semchen zodu dene me drogidua roa. Dene di tenje chi gyoris peche.
Ya tedo roas kitin so senje la tene. Senje kange la tene to bone kiletes mas. Senje mazo ba nga chi na roba chi.
Yeah, so that's the dependent arising, right? This body arose from that determination and promise to help sentient beings as long as they are suffering. And then when samsara is empty and they are no longer suffering, right? Then that can dissolve. So that's a dependent arising.
Pena tanu so to mama imbi chechi sena mo jawa ge pa me ge na mo pa nga sonje san ni sonje ge shila.
Yeah.
Ani senje selle ba ina nge shi nga to demba.
Nge shi nga to demba.
Tende chi yong sho so melo jaba ida stil she so na nge shi ro me ba to yong.
And also so those are the kind of general things that bring this forth. And then there are specific characteristics of different enjoyment bodies or sambhogakaya Buddhas. So if we think of Amitabha, for example, he made a specific vow to establish a pure land, right? The land of bliss, the Western Pure Land, for the benefit of all beings, and also said that whoever is born within this Pure Land, may they possess the 5 types of clairvoyance. And then so partly through the power of that vow, right, the enjoyment body and the Pure Land are manifesting in that way. So we can see from that this is also connected with prayers too, right? That specific prayers that are made by the being that's cultivating may result in specific characteristics of their enjoyment body. Yeah, so every Buddha, every being that achieves enlightenment will necessarily possess this enjoyment body, and how this arises is connected to these various causes. Did that answer your question, Sue?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So
Geshe is encouraging you, if you want more information, you'll want to take a look at the Ornament of Clear Realizations, chapter 4. I'm sorry, chapter 8. My apologies, Sue. Chapter 8. Anybody else?
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So Geshe said we're all going to achieve that enjoyment body once we get enlightened. So it's going to happen for all of us. And also to understand that really all of these bodies, right, the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, the Nirmanakaya, and the Swabhavakaya, which we met today, this nature truth body, these are all achieved in that same instant, right, in that same moment of enlightenment. Yeah. And also to know that different perfections are especially associated with particular bodies, right? So with that motivation of bodhicitta, engaging in the practices of generosity, patience, and so forth, this is especially associated with the 2 form bodies, right? The Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya. That's another important point here. So that's why we say it's through these form bodies, so through the Nirmanakaya and the Sambhogakaya, that we accomplish the welfare of others. And that's a result similar to the cause, isn't it? And it is through meditation on the wisdom side, meditation on emptiness, that is most connected with the other 2 of these 4 bodies, specifically the Dharmakaya, the truth body, and the Swabhavakaya, right, the nature truth body. So that's why we say, right, it's through that emptiness. So these are the 2 bodies through which we achieve mainly our own welfare, the practitioner's own welfare. Very important point. So because we practice the wisdom side of the path and the method side of the path, it is said that it's almost as if those 2 different types of bodies are kind of packaged together. So these are kind of the Dharmakaya and the Swabhavakaya are very related together because they're connected with wisdom, right? And the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya, these are very related together because they're more connected with method. And that supreme emanation body, also remembering that this came, for example, when Buddha Shakyamuni thought, if we abide with the Sambhogakaya form, right, very limited, it's only those realized beings who can perceive. Therefore, for the benefit of sentient beings, may I arise the supreme Nirmanakaya in the world.
야 던더를 원로를 야 던더라고 지래 된다.
Trugudi lungkula
죽게
Ale, right. And it is said actually that when the supreme Nirmanakaya manifests the passing away, from the ultimate perspective, this is actually just a reabsorbing into the Sambhogakaya, into the enjoyment body. So that's another interesting point.
야 저와 또쇼 옛날에 대성이 대성아.
Anything else, or shall we close for the day?
Yeah, that we have a question from a related question from Brigitte on Facebook.
Yeah.
She's asking, are we this Kaya's now, but we only must clear karma to come back to our original clear Buddha nature?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So are we, I just want to read it back to you, Dave, so I'm sure I got it. Are we these Kayas now? And we just need to clear away the karma to kind of go back to that original nature because of Buddha
nature. Yeah, Buddha nature. Yeah.
Nganso tanda kuji dinso in base. Karin sena nganso jangchogi kandisla rik chikyore roa sangyegi rik chikyore. Didabo samlo tanda then nganso tanda dinso kuji re duas. Nganso le dang jipa mepaso ne deni kuji dinso tun tugire duas. Direbesa.
Yeah. 나도 단자 남아선가 봐잖아 대레스. 연다지에는 또 뭐니 그야 놀러를 요하레스 아주 잘 요하레스.
Ale mari kodi lagires roa tambo yores roa sangyegi rik yotsang roa dene dinso mepaso ne dene sangyegi rik tong tugire duas. Ngumene yores dabo lagire ngachena midi.
야야야야. 대세제 세가 많이 요하레.
Yeah.
아고서라와 다른 강가 요하레. 다 그거 저바도 동아지소나.
Yeah.
대지 강가리도 시고 차용소나.
Inenganso tanda dinso yin love tugyo mare.
Yeah.
So Geshe doesn't think that we could say that we are these four kayas now. He doesn't think that we could say that we are these four bodies now. However, if we kind of clear away the obscurations and the defilements that are covering our Buddha nature and are able to actualize it, then we can manifest these four kayas.
하고서 다이나 요미 단달로 이 세계 요 주어레스. 나세가 또 많이 걸어.
Yep.
단단히 내 돈비가는 거니 그 이세고 이제 지지는 것도 수지 이사 나요 라기 아레스.
However, the people who say that this is we are already these four kayas, this isn't completely without a reason. Because if you think that the Swabhavakaya, the nature truth body, is the manifestation of the emptiness of the mind itself, that emptiness of the mind itself is something that we possess right now, right? So if you think about it from that perspective, we do possess that body.
매매 제세고 요 알쿵 요 아르다스. 하고서와 빼나지엘라마 노라 수지 뺑에 도서 도마라 세네. 하고서와 빼줘하게 될 매도 빼만 도 냠바 지나라.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the people who say this are not without scriptural references, because in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, which I think in English we call, the sublime continuum, it's said that like we possess this Buddha's body, it's like the statue of a Buddha that is within a wilted lotus. That's the example that's given, right? So it is already there. From that point of view. And you can look specifically at the 9 examples that are outlined within the Uttara Tantra Shastra. And so in this way, we can take this example and apply it to ourselves, that it's like we have like this body of a Buddha kind of wrapped within the clothing and the cloth of all of our confusion and so forth, right? So we have to kind of unwrap. So that's, there is a reason for that perspective. Because the emptiness of the mind is the emptiness of the mind right now when we're a sentient being and when we're a Buddha, because that emptiness of the mind is something that is unchanging, right? It's permanent, right? The emptiness of the mind is something that's permanent. And it also goes back to peeling back the layers of the onions, right? The things that are covering that, they are adventitious, right? Loburwa, which means that they can be removed. So in that way, there's reason to make this argument of the kaya is already there, actually.
Yes, ma. O ta ina nganzo chena ta te sonji ri se tu mani ta te nikala.
But what we say, right, in our view, is that this is the Buddha nature, right? It is the potential for Buddha, right? And that's related to the mind's emptiness.
하고서 sonji 거는 로야 게 잘라지.
It is something that can become a body, a kaya of the Buddha.
하건 주르세 그래서 마도 근제요 말했단다. 주르와.
It's a common cause with what becomes that kaya, that manifestation.
하고서 내가 다 손지 센터가 말 가래서 단다 가면 뭐 못이와.
Yeah, I guess listen, it's a bit incongruous to say we're already Buddhas or we already possess these four bodies because we're experiencing problems a lot of the time. We're unhappy a lot of the time, aren't we? So yeah, in that way, it's kind of difficult to say. So really, these are just Geshe wants to emphasize, we can have respect for both of these perspectives, right? Understanding where they're leading. Yeah. Well, it's just that what we're emphasizing is that to get there, you need to peel away those layers of the onion. Otherwise, it's not doing you much good. What's there, right? Yeah. So I think that's all Geshe's comments on that one. Anything else, Dave? Go ahead.
Sue, did you have another question?
Well, the question on Facebook was kind of leading into the same as what my question was, because I'm thinking that it's already probably part of nature, our nature, to have that already. It's just because it's impermanent, right? Or it's not impermanent, it's permanent.
Yes, the mind's emptiness is permanent. Yes, I checked that with Geshe, because like whenever I say the word permanent in the translation, I want to be super careful of when I say that word because it can get you to a lot of hot water. But yes, it is. The mind's emptiness is permanent. Semgi tombani hakpa yinsang nanso ngumane yures. Yes, so that's correct. That's correct. It's unchanging. The emptiness of the mind is something that's unchanging. Yeah. The body that it's within is going to change, right? Our physical house of this mind, but the mind's emptiness, that's unchanging. But there's a paradox here, isn't there? The mind's emptiness is unchanging, always abiding, but the mind itself is changing all the time, isn't it? Think about how we experience the mind. There's a lot of change there that seems to be happening. Yeah. But the mind is also continuous in that it never kind of ends. Tamayomare. It doesn't disappear, right? It's a continuum.
So I was
things to think about.
think that the Facebook question was on the same lines as what my next question was going to be. So
it all got commented on. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it, Dave.
I'd like to understand the relationship between Pure Land, Samboka Kaya, and Hayasika Tantra illusory body. It seems to me there may be some relation, but I don't think they're perfectly correlated because I think I would recall reading some Hayasika Tantra deities have Pure Land, some do not, which means that if that's true, that they're not completely related. But I'm curious.
So I just want to say the question back to you, Dave, to make sure I got it correctly. So you're asking what's the relationship between the Pure Land, Samboga Kaya, and the illusory body? Like, are these all kind of related? And then the next one is, in terms of how that relates to Pure Land, you've also heard that some, like Yidams of highest yoga tantra, they don't have a Pure Land. So you're wondering how that fits into the Samboga Kaya. Okay. Nanso di Jawa kandes chikures chua di dabo chikure dewa nanso dagshin longku dang julu yore rwa dinso sum Jawa kandes chigyores. Ane de vyang koson de lamegyugi yidam kashe konso dagshin yomares. Dagshin menayang denedi konsogi lunkudang kandes drogiyores. Triodire.
Me ta tedo sechi ba. Pena ngazo jali koro jali te akosarwa. Jali te tal loku ngosana ma jali toke kuza jiwarawa.
Yeah.
Te tama loku koro chano was.
So the way to think about the illusory body is that it's like how Geshe is describing it is like a step before. So you have the ordinary being, right? The yogi or the yogini, and they're practicing and they achieve this illusory body. Then gyulu la tene lonku yongyo.
Yeah. Jali thought sona. Ani message no jali kadi thought sona. Tagaro se tela lonku to bichar.
And once the illusory body is achieved, on the basis of that, it said usually within the same lifetime, the Sambhoga Kaya, the enjoyment body, can be achieved. So it's like Tambo Gyulu Yongyoris, then Gyulu Latene. So the illusory body is actually what comes before the Sambhoga Kaya.
Tambo Matabi Jili Sajingore. Tene Tela Tene Kale, Javantoni, Tabi Jili Langore. Tabi Jili Latene ta Kuzate, Lokachano, Masetagarol.
So the ideal unfolding of this, right, for the yogi or the yogini, is that he or she is achieving the impure illusory body. Then they are achieving the pure illusory body. And then within that very lifetime, on the basis of that pure illusory body, they can bring forth the Sambhoga Kaya, the enjoyment body.
Hagosong. Hagosong.
Hagosong.
That the Digas Honji to Koro Tomo Main Biteni, Tale to Melola and Tripishi, are you ready?
And so the Buddha field into which that fully enlightened being is born, right, and Sambhoga Kaya and so forth, is said to be Konsumunlamdang. We can't say karma in the case of a Buddha, right? So we say based on the power of their merits and the specific prayers and aspirations they made, the particular Buddha field or Pure Land manifests. And Geshe said that so Geshe is also not sure that you could say that highest Yoga Tantra deities don't have a Buddha field, right? Because because the Sambhoga Kaya necessarily abides within a Buddha field. That's part of its characteristics. But what Geshe is saying is that not all of these Pure Lands or Buddha fields will be named, right? We don't necessarily have, like, for example, Amitabha, his Pure Land has a very specific function and characteristics, and it has a name and it's well known. But that won't be the case with necessarily all the different deities. Yeah. And so ultimately, too, we understand that it's the I itself which becomes the Sambhoga Kaya, but that initially the illusory body, the illusory body arises on the basis, we talk more about it as arising on the basis of the ordinary body we possess now. So you're going through steps. Yeah. The illusory body, gyulupa. Yeah, so when you put the pa suffix on Tibetan words, it's like the illusory body, I don't want to say man, because it's like man or woman. So the illusory body person, the illusory body person becomes the Sambhoga Kaya. And also we understand that the illusory body itself is very much connected with the extremely subtle
wind.
Lung mare mare. Yes, but also something else. Sorry. Lungdang semniga. Lungdang sem chamala. Yes, sorry. The extremely subtle wind and mind. Sorry. Brain blackouts. Huh? Yeah. So and this is all connected with the self, which is why we call it the illusory body person, right? Because datum nga yin samso chigure.
야 된다 jelly 토끼 구사대
Yeah.
나 이소 그때 로그 쳐 된다
So the person who achieves the illusory body and thinks I am this person, they become that illusory body person. So it's connected with your sense of self, right? Is what Geshe says.
It's a basis for imputing self.
The dak giji double chagirebe. Gyulu. Yes. The illusory body does become the basis of the designation of the self for that practitioner. Yeah.
And others? The basis for self and others?
We're talking, so let me ask this back, but we're talking about one person achieving this, right? That's the perspective. So are you asking if your illusory body becomes the basis for others' illusory body? Is that what you're asking?
No, that the illusory, I can't say it right now, the body is also the basis for others' illusory. I don't know why I can't say that word.
Does your achieving the illusory body act as the basis or the cause for others achieving the illusory body? I think that's what you're asking, right?
You have that basis. Like, it's not singular. All others have that basis of the illusionary body.
I think it is singular though. Let me check. Gyulu, nganso gyulu seriadi, nganso gi gyulu latene, mi jenda gyulu top to gire besa. Nganso gi gyulu chipoyo mare, ngadang jen niga gi gyulu re, stila to gire. Yeah. So it is individual, Suzette. I just checked with Geshe. Yeah, it's your illusory body because it's connected with your I, yourself. So dagdang jawachi. Yeah.
이번에 자가 셔마도 소지 쪼된데서 로간도가 되는 일이 되다. 자가 셔마도 소지 쪼된데서 또 코로코로 로간도와.
Yeah.
그 코로스 질리 로가래 두아스.
Yes. So like we have Shakyamuni and we have Maitreya, and these are distinctive beings, right? And as part of their enlightenment, they would have brought forth their own distinctive illusory bodies. So this is the progression of the individual level. Yeah.
둘리도세 자모이자 코과과야 메아이자 지말라리바 파타나 코로끈다 가로 끝가로 통하러 왔어. 이나라고는 라고 첨보쳐야 말을 코로끝 주는로야 말했어.
And that illusory body is connected with the individual's extremely subtle wind and mind, right? Which are particular to that individual. But it is also through this that we get all these kind of really amazing things that happen where Milarepa can be inside the ram's horn during a rainstorm. And it appears that his body hasn't shrunk and the ram's horn hasn't gotten bigger, right? So the illusory body can manifest those kind of things. Yeah, so if it was like a self and others, then Milarepa's disciple, I think it was Rendawa in this case, he probably also would have been able to sorry, it's another Rechungpa, not Rendawa, Rechungpa would have also been able to kind of do that with his body, but he wasn't, right? Because the illusory body was particular to Milarepa. And remember how the story came up, right? Rechungpa had gone to India and he came back with some pretty profound instructions, and he thought, okay, well, I have a lot more lineage than Milarepa does now. And so Milarepa manifested this to kind of reduce his pride, right? So that was a miraculous manifestation of that Gyulu Gizuturo. So that was a miraculous manifestation that occurred in that story. So shall we end the session here?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And we'll be here Saturday and Sunday next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,